spanning the globe to bring you 3 contestants, united in their love of data. Thousands look on as these data gladiators battle for victory with the help of their talented sous-visors. The tension builds as our contestants drag and drop at lightning speed. But as the clock ticks away, so too do dreams of glory. For only one Viz can reign supreme. The thrill of victory, the agony of decision, the human drama of analytic competition. This is Tableau's wide world of data, Iron Viz. And now, please welcome to the stage our hosts, Ross Perez and Kat Gepford.
Hello and welcome. We're live from Viz Stadium for the 6th annual Tableau Iron Viz Championship. I'm Ross Perez.
And I'm Kathleen Gepford.
And what a show we have for you. Today, you're joining some of the finest Vizzers in the world to answer this simple question. Whose Viz will reign supreme? Our contestants must battle each other with the same identical data set in order to create the finest visual story in the room.
That's right. Our contestants will have only 20 minutes to create at least 2 visualizations, which they then must combine into a single dashboard or story. Now, this is a challenge that would crush some of the best data analysts in the world, but we have scoured the globe, and we're here to bring before you preeminent data artisans. And I'm here to tell you there is not a data set in the world that's going to stop them.
Our first contestant is Russell Spangler. Russell is a senior BI manager at Amazon and the esteemed co-founder of the Cincinnati Tableau user group. He showed us his Viz chops earlier this year with one of the most intricate visualizations we've ever seen that won the Food Viz contest. His view delicately combines sushi and sushi stats into one delicious visual treat. It'll be interesting to see how thinly he slices this data.
That is indeed a tasty Viz. Helping Russell today on stage is his sous-visor, Roger Howe. Roger is a Tableau product manager, and his entire career focus has been on helping to make Tableau both delightful to use and highly performant. That focus is really going to come in handy for Russell, as today's data set is rather large.
Our second contestant is Robert Rouse. Robert is an analytics consultant at Interworks Incorporated. He is a U.S. Air Force Academy alum and a Tableau Zen master. He earned his spot in the Iron Viz Championship with his visualization showing the divisiveness of American politics that won the Politics Viz contest, particularly appropriate given recent events.
Yes, and in fact, in the immortal words of Kermit the Frog, moving right along from that. So, assisting Robert on stage is his sous-visor, Clara Siegel. Clara is a product manager for Tableau Online, and her professional focus has been on user experience. I have a feeling that Robert is really going to appreciate the time she spent in that area as he drags and drops over the next 20 minutes or so.
Our third contestant is Curtis Harris. Curtis won the mobile visualization contest with his responsive and intriguing visualization showing the history of the single-season home run record. It was so good, we almost had to test him for performance-enhancing drugs. Day-to-day, he's a senior BI developer at Health Catalyst, and he blogs at themarkscard.com.
The Marks card? We didn't trademark that.
Or maybe our patents don't go to that level of detail.
Oh, brace yourselves. If you don't like wordplay, you are in for a long event. So joining Curtis on stage is Zane Murfitt, his sous-visor. Zane joins us from the Tableau sales team, and don't worry, he promised he's not going to bring up licensing for the next 40 minutes or so. Zane is actually well known throughout Tableau for both his incredible product knowledge and his ability to just understand what it is his customers need. That intuition is going to be a real boon to Curtis as he digs into this data.
As you can see, we've assembled before you some of the finest visitors in the world. But before we get them competing, Kathleen, can you tell us a little bit about how our contestants will be judged?
Yes, absolutely. Just like the Nielsen's, it's the audience that steers this ship. It is absolutely imperative that you tweet. So please, when you tweet, include the hashtag IV and the first 3 letters of your favorite contestant's name. A couple of things to bear in mind. First of all, tweets will be counted up through the end of judging. Additionally, every account can only get 1 tweet counted, so spend your tweet wisely. And last but not least, make sure you turn on location services because we will be filtering and we're only going to include tweets from the TC campus.
Your tweets matter. The contestant with the most tweets will receive 10 points added to their final score. The contestant with the second most will receive 5, and the contestant with the least will receive none at all. As you can imagine, the difference of these 10 points is often the difference between first and last place.
Absolutely. The rest of the evaluation is subjective and is handled by our panel of expert judges. They will be talking amongst themselves at the end of that. Once our contestants announce and talk about their Vizes, they will discuss amongst themselves, and then they will write down individual scores. They will be judging in 3 areas: visual design, strength of story, and Viz best practices. Now, we personally do believe that these 3 components are all absolutely equal in importance, and thus they are worth equal numbers of points, 30 points each. At the end of that, we will tally up all the points, and whoever has the most points wins. It's very simple. So I think it's time. Ross, can you tell us what tricksy little data set you found for us?
Well, we actually have a relatively large data set here today, Kathleen, and it's very rare that you find a set that combines temporal and numerical and geographical data in one neat package, but we certainly have it here today. Contestants, prepare yourselves for battle taxi data.
Taxi data. I suspect that's going to be uber interesting. Sorry, not sorry. Coming to us from New York's famed public data catalog, this data set includes 150 million rows of everything from morning commutes to late night pukes. Included in this data are detailed fare transaction information and latitude and longitude for pickup and drop-off.
And there's more. In honor of Tableau 10's native joining capabilities, we'll be allowing our contestants to join or blend a secondary data source of their choosing, provided that they use the taxi data as their primary source of analysis. This added data set is sure to give our contestants a much-needed lift.
Yes, it will.
Contestants, your year-long toil has brought you here. There's 12,000 eyes on you and $2,000 on the line. Your only goal: create the finest visual story in the room. Mice at the ready. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Viz! And they're off. As our contestants dig into this data, let's meet our panel of judges. First off, please welcome back to the Iron Viz stage 2015's Iron Viz champion, Shine Pulikathara. When he is not earning the Iron Viz crown, Shine is a visualization manager at Facebook, and I would like to point out he has not yet accepted my friend request. It's okay, it's fine. Shine, I would love to hear from you. What are our contestants thinking right now? You've been here, you've been in this position. What's going through your mind when you just first dig into the data?
Yeah, I'd like to say, last year participating in the Iron Viz was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And it's a race against time where every click and every keystroke matters. And I remember that as the timer was clicking down, it felt like time just stood still, and I was completely absorbed in what I was doing. And that's what I see our brave Iron Vizers doing here tonight. And good Godspeed and good luck to them.
Is it kind of like your Viz life is flashing before your eyes?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Our second judge is actually a pair of judges, and we're very lucky to have on stage with us Tableau's co-founder and chief Canadian dry humorist, Chris Stolte. He's also joined on stage by Tom Walker, Tableau's CFO. Now, Tom is infamous for two things. The first one being cutting budgets, and the second one being picking up people's bar tabs. So you might want to keep a tab on him later tonight. Gentlemen, you have a really unique perspective, having been one of Tableau's first employees and also, well, Tableau's inventor. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what our contestants can do to impress you today.
That's a great question. First off, I do want to explain why Tom and I are judging together. I'm relatively new to visualization, and he's relatively new to numbers. So working together, we think we can figure this out. We're really going to be looking for the depth of analysis, how they're really getting in there, getting the right metrics, really thinking about the story. Those are the things that I think are going to catch our eye, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, the aesthetics. I mean, being able to tell a story very succinctly is extremely important. When you have to make fast decisions, it's very important to be able to look at something and really see what it's telling you. And so I'll be looking for that.
Yeah, basically, we love beautiful things. So.
Yeah. Right on. So our last and certainly not least judge is Dr. Jock McKinley. Jock has, yes, please give it up. Jock has spent his entire career focusing on the intricate interactions between the eye and the human brain. His focus has helped us give you a tool that helps to display data in ways that allow you to make observations more innate to find, easy to understand. Jock, what recommendations do you have for our contestants to score highly in areas like Viz best practices or aesthetics?
My recommendations is do a good job with Viz best practices and make it look beautiful. What we're doing, of course, we have a monitor up here so we can see what you guys see up on the big monitor as well. So that's why we're all looking over that way. We're actually very interested also in the data manipulations they're doing, like Russell right here is writing a calc at the moment, and you know, we're paying attention to what's going on. It's not the first calc he's written actually in the last few minutes, but that's what I have to say for now. So.
And that actually gives us a great opportunity to go to one of our SUV-visors. This data set is enormous. It's about 150 million records, as you were saying. It's 15 gigabytes on the laptop. Sometimes people ask, how much data can Tableau handle? Well, the answer is quite a bit, and this is just in a TDE. So, Roger, can you tell us a little bit about how Russell is approaching this data set, how he's optimizing for performance? I know this also happens to be your area of activity in the product as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, you can see Russell's actually building a Viz, a huge map, which has millions of marks. But you also notice that on the filter shelf, he's dropped a sample true to actually pick out just a few of the marks to visualize using the hidden random function in the calculation language. So Tableau is doing a couple things. It's issuing a query to pull in a lot of data, but we also want to restrict the number of marks that we're actually showing the user in that map.
Right, because whenever you are creating a visualization with many marks, of course, everybody's used to seeing the query and then also seeing the computing the visualization part. So you're shortening the computing the visualization part, essentially.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Zane, I would love to hear from you. What sort of things were important to you when you first saw this data? Like, what did you want to do with it? What kind of questions did you want to ask?
Yeah, it's really fun coming to Tableau conference and seeing signs like we are data people. And I think behind any data point is a story typically about a human being, or it has impact on a human, you know, even if it's like a machine spitting out information. And so as Curtis and I were talking about the data set, that was really what we tried to focus on, is like, what is the human story here? Is it the drivers? Is it the people riding? Is it just the citizens of this city? And I think Curtis has come up with a really, really cool story that hopefully you all really like at the end here. But that was really what we wanted to really dive into, like, what's the human element here, and really explore the meaning behind that.
Excellent.
Now we can see our contestants digging into data here, and it actually looks like Curtis is going to grab a data set to blend. We already saw Robert do that. Clara, I'm kind of interested to hear, can you give us a little bit of a preview into the data set that he's using, that he's brought in to add to the taxi data source?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Robert has done is he's started with this absolutely gigantic data set with the taxi data. And what he's found is actually NOAA data online, which has, and this is a little bit of a preview for his story that he'll tell later, data on the snow days and how much snow fell in New York City in Central Park. And he actually had to memorize the URLs, go to them, and then he was able to just copy and paste the table directly from the web right into Tableau, and it created his extract. So it's really, really cool. I feel like I'm learning things.
Well, let me get this straight. We gave him 150 million rows, and he said, that is not enough data. I'm going to go and get more. Right on. That's the kind of spirit I love to see. Ross, you've been Iron Viz MC host since the beginning, since its inception. What other blending have you ever seen done on the stage before?
Well, actually, thank you for teeing me up for that one. We've never seen blending before, so this is actually really exciting, and we can see Curtis and Robert both bringing in secondary data sources. Of course, Tableau adding that capability to join natively data sources in Tableau 10. Very powerful feature that I'm sure many of you are excited about. You know, and what I'd love to know, so Chris, you've had the opportunity to see Tableau grow from a research project to a full-fledged business intelligence tool with many features such as data joining and blending. What do you think in a competition like this where contestants are trying to arrive at their solutions really quickly, what do you think is the most important feature that Tableau has that allows them to do that?
We were really focused on that question to me.
Well, I actually have a question. Do you want to repeat it, and then I'll go mine?
I caught the question. I just want to make sure we were jumping in. I think one of the most important features here is that immediate feedback and ability to do incremental construction. Just watching they're doing some really complicated stuff here, but that ability to see each intermediate result, I think, really helps. And that to me is probably the most important feature. It kind of goes through all this. And there's some really amazing stuff up here. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, absolutely. While we're asking questions of the judges, I actually have one for Jock. Jock, in Tableau 10, we changed the color palette. Can you tell me a little bit about what the decision behind that was? And I saw our visitors were here, getting into color and selecting colors. Why does color matter on a viz, and why do we go with a new color palette?
So there's two reasons. Color is really effective for encoding data in particular ways, and the second one is the aesthetics part of it. And so in version 10. Actually, unfortunately, Maureen is home sick with viral bronchitis. Maureen Stone is a research scientist at Tableau and an expert on color. And so she built a tool that she and Christy Miller, our director of visual design, sat down, and they worked on both of those problems at the same time. Both what color works really well for showing quantitative or categorical data, and also the aesthetics of it. And I think they did a fabulous job. I think the colors in 10 are much better than before. And we will be judging, one of the categories here is visual aesthetics. We will be judging the colors that people are using.
Well, it's getting to about halfway through the competition, which I think means it might be time to talk to our audience and see what they think about the visualizations that are being created here. Now, I'll introduce our correspondent, but to be frank, you always seem to do a better job of saying his name, so.
I just really, really like saying Andy Cotgreave.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you, Ross. And welcome to the floor of the Iron Viz crowd. I'm here with 3 alumni. First of all, Anya. You competed in 2012, and how did you do in 2012?
I was champion.
Champion, fantastic. 4 years ago, it seems like an eternity since the last election. What has happened
He'll tell us.
in the 4 years to Iron Viz in those 4 years?
Well, when we competed, there were about 500 people in the audience. There was none of this. We had like tables with tablecloths on them. But what really has changed is just seeing how Tableau has evolved as a product has allowed being able to be built in 20 minutes has just increased with leaps and bounds. It's amazing to see what can be done now versus what could be done then. And one other thing I did want to know is just there's only been one woman Iron Viz champion, so I would love to encourage all the Data Warrior princesses out there to go for it.
We need you.
Thank you very much, Anya. And I will say with Ryan, now you were 2013 champion as well. Everybody know. Ryan was a champion. What advice would you give to somebody in the crowd who maybe wants to compete in Iron Viz next year?
Yeah, definitely, Andy. I always tell people to find a topic that they love outside of their day job and try to answer their own questions using Tableau Public. That you're going to learn inevitably some tricks that are going to help you. You'll have some tricks up your sleeve that you can incorporate into an Iron Viz entry. And when you do get to that entry, keep it simple. Find a cool story in the data set and make sure people understand that story. That's what will get you a leg up and a chance to win.
Fantastic advice. Hopefully we'll see more fantastic people next year. And finally, Charles, you were a sous-viser in the famous 2012 Iron Viz 2. What's it like as a sous-viser? What's your job and your role?
Well, I wish I could say it's a hard job, Andy, but it's actually quite easy because all the contestants are so good with Tableau that they don't need a lot of technical advice, they don't need a lot of expertise, they just need emotional support. It's actually really nerve-wracking being up on the stage. And I remember Ben Jones, who I helped, we had a calc that we were planning. It was a distance calc, and it wasn't working in the moment, and we had to kind of just take a deep breath and settle down, and that helped us get through.
You were amazing, Charles. Thank you. All right, you were all amazing. Thank you to all our alumni. And with that, back over to you, Ross and Kat. Thank you.
Well, all of our contestants are deep into their formatting at this point, which is very interesting, but only interesting when we see the final version. So I think this might be a good opportunity for us to poke fun at our contestants just a little bit. It's an Iron Viz tradition. Apologies, contestants and sous-visers, but they all gave us a little bit of information, a little bit of dirt about themselves that we want to share with you today. We'll start with the obvious. Roger is into pineapples.
He gave you a pre-attentive visual cue there about that fact. In fact, I was talking to Roger earlier, and he had mentioned that he really liked pineapples. And then he was joking around that if you are what you eat, probably he's about 30% pineapple at any given time. So that's good to know. Going on to Robert, one of the most interesting things he told me is that he was actually an early pioneer in wearables. And what I mean by that is when he was a wee young lad, he used to go down to Radio Shack, buy electronics, go to the tool shed, get duct tape and Velcro, and he made his own wearables. So, inventor of wearables, Robert Rouse, you heard it here first.
And actually, all of our contestants share a little bit of experiment, scientific background. They're very, yeah, exactly. They want to try things. And of course, that's also true of Russell. Russell actually was in culinary school for a time and then dropped out. He's obviously done very well for himself as a business intelligence manager and seems to have found his calling. But it's interesting to think if this is kind of fueled in a way by his ability to create delicious food, and obviously he created that food viz before as well.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing here is that he's used to pressure cooker situations.
You could say that.
I'm here all night. One of my favorite details that I heard about Clara Siegel is that she has two really big passions, Disneyland and math, which kind of makes me wonder if the perfect job for her wouldn't be that person who figures out wherever point you're at line at Disneyland, how long it's going to be until you can finally get on the ride.
I always wonder how it gets up to 180 minutes. Wouldn't you just turn around? But people love roller coasters, I guess. Now, Zane, yours is a real doozy. So apparently, you had an afro for 7 years. That's incredible. And do I understand this right? Your current wife met you at that time and actually was interested.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I love disco. I love the 70s, and I just thought that was an acceptable hairstyle for an adult man. And,
you should have grown it back out for the show. It's a 70s theme.
Yeah, she took the long play, and I eventually saw the error of my ways. But I always kind of missed the fro. I don't know. Maybe I'll grow one for next year or something.
There you go.
You love the nightlife. You like to boogie.
Oh yeah.
Right on. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the picture of Zane with the hair, but I want to paint a visual picture for you, if I may. Are you familiar with Bob Ross, the little happy trees painter guy, Happy Little Clouds? There was a distinct resemblance. So if you find him at Data Night Out, ask him to show you the picture.
Well, that leaves us with Curtis, and Curtis, also an experimenter, also has a little bit of a trouble committing to things. He has a commitment issue, but mostly with just objects. He's actually gone through 16 cars in 16 years, so a bit of a car guy, a bit of a restless nature, and you can see. He told me when he was creating this visualization and thinking about how to go about it that he had 25 different ideas he had to toss away because he he was continuing to experiment.
So you can see
That's right. So 16 cars in 16 years. If there are any dealers out there, see his face and go find him at Data Night Out, because he's probably back in the market again for another car at this point.
Highlights.
All right, so we have our 3 contestants. They're creating their visualizations. They've actually started the dashboard. It's about 3 minutes and 35 seconds left, so they don't have too much time, but luckily it looks like all of them have managed to piece together a visualization. And at this point, you know, I'd love to kind of get the standpoint of Tom here. Tom, you're a first-time judge on Iron Viz. You know, what are you seeing as these contestants are dashboarding, and what's your first reaction?
I think I want to hire some of them to work for me. So I'm kind of blown away how fast it's going and how they're kind of catching my eye. All 3 of them are doing a spectacular job. Russell, I could see the story kind of formulating early on, and then but followed by Robert there. He's getting very creative, old school taxi, Viz there, and then Curtis is doing a great job with stories. So it's amazing that it's coming together in, what is this, 18 minutes? Is that how long we've been going?
Yeah.
17 minutes, I guess is what it is. But it's amazing. So enjoying this tremendously.
Yeah.
Now, Clara, actually, I like that Tom alluded to the taxi theming of the Viz. Now, there's 2 competing schools of thought here. One is that you want to spend as much time on the visualization as possible, so you don't spend too much time on formatting. The other school of thought is that you probably want to spend more time on formatting so that you can kind of show and illustrate the data a little bit better. How did you guys kind of balance those 2?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that Robert did a really great job of balancing. One thing you'll notice in his visualizations is each of the 3 in his story tells this incredibly rich story. He's been able to put so many data points on each page, but in a way where the insight really leaps out at you. So synthesizing that data is really rich, really fantastic. And in fact, these are items that are below the red line. So he's actually finished building the main parts of his insights. And now what he's doing is adding texture, adding color to make it even clearer as you're looking at the Viz. What is it that we're looking at? And to really pull you into the story even more.
Drop lines.
Absolutely. You know, Ross, as I've been watching this, I've seen 2 maps. Is that something that you expected? Did you have any thoughts about what you thought you were going to see with the data that you picked?
Well, I was a little worried because 150 million marks, which Tableau can do, but you might be waiting for a second because it's a lot of marks. Yeah. But you can see that these contestants have partitioned their data in a way that they can tell the story, because this data set has thousands and thousands and thousands of stories, and if you can focus on a particular subset of the data, then you can enable the visualization to show a little bit more than just a lot of data. So I expected them to map. I'm glad that they are. It's certainly a great data source to be mapping with. And actually, it looks like Curtis is doing a mobile visualization template, new feature in Tableau 10.
That is actually incredibly thematic if you think about it, because what do you do when you're in a taxi? You're on your phone the whole time. So I think that makes really good sense given this data.
Of course. Well, audience, we're getting down to the final seconds of the show. I'm going to need your help counting down from 20. So when we get to 20, join along and we'll finish them out. 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Mice down. minutes. 20 minutes, and they're able to create visualizations from a very challenging data source, and I'm just excited to hear from our contestants at this point. So, of course, we're going to start with Russell Spangler. And Russell, we'll take a deep look at your Viz here, and what we'd love to know is how you went about this analysis, what it shows us, and how you kind of put everything together into one cohesive view.
So I took the data set, and basically what I kind of wanted to do is I wanted to look at the numbers and the metrics and what's important, and I kind of distilled it down to like what's happening per day. So I created the Daily Taxi Data Analyzer 2000, and basically this is a way to dig through all this taxi data. And what we have is we have a filter that's applied to the whole dashboard, and then I created a map that's based off of drop-off points, and you can see throughout the day how that changes, and that's all highlightable, and it interacts with kind of the data to the right on the different KPIs. And then I also kind of took KPIs, which are basically like the number of trips happening, the total based on the KPI you select, an average, a min, and a medium, and max. And basically what I have is I have a parameter that you could drop down, and you could select different ones. So I could see the fare, I could see tips, I could see distance, and I could see throughout the day that, how that changes. So I could see that higher tips are happening in the morning and late in the evening, and then kind of throughout the afternoon, you see less of that. And then we have spikes on the minutes if you want to look at that, and we could do that with any of the metrics. And basically, I have a chart here down here in the below. It's kind of a bullet chart, and it's a daily average versus a yearly average. And what that's doing is comparing, that current day to the yearly average. And here, for example, we could see that on January 1st, that the average distance for that day is a lot higher than the yearly average. And then I kind of wanted to make something a little bit more interesting. So, for example, basically, I could say that there's a total of 1.3 million miles traveled on January 1st through taxis. And you kind of say 1.3 million, okay, I understand it a little bit. But what I could do is I created the taxi exchange rate, and what that does is it takes kind of things you're familiar with, and it will convert that number to different things. So if I select moon, you can see that in one day, New York taxi drivers drive 5.7 times one-way trips to the moon, right? Yeah. So, and I added a few more extra kind of KPIs down here at the bottom, and you can see like duration, fare, and tip. So basically, if I took a taxi cab, you'd see, you can go 800. It'd take you 809,000 minutes. It cost you $920,000, and then you would have to tip them $87,000 for the trip. And then I have a little chart too. This is actually kind of the invoice of what this number would be, and this is the percent of what a moon trip takes. And basically 17% of the day is actually just one trip of the moon, and you can kind of see how it all ties together. And we have the moon, I did around the earth, and then I did the United States from the longest points.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So when they get that moon shuttle going, they're going to be hiring you to help monetize it, I have a feeling. So Roger, is there anything that you would like to add to Russell's explanation?
Yeah, absolutely. So as somebody that came to this data set with a fresh set of eyes, and Russell really had the vision here, he anchored me in this data set. He gave me a beautiful, fun, interactive map where if you scroll the hours, I can actually see kind of the taxi rides progressing throughout the day. He's got the high-level KPIs to make sure I'm focusing on the details that are important. He's got that year versus day, so I can get the little picture of the day against the whole year picture. And then also, like you said, there's a lot of data in this data set, even on a daily basis. How do I reason about 1.3 million miles? I can't really. It's not a scale I normally fathom. But at least something like trips to the moon, distance across the US or around the world, those are things that are more familiar to me. So he's actually bringing in some external data here to help contextualize this data set.
Very nice.
Thank you, Roger. Well, that brings us to Robert Rouse. So Robert, we're excited to hear about your visualization. Tell us about how you created it and what you were going for here today. And judges, just a quick reminder, please do be filling out your judge scoring forms, because we do want to be able to tell who our winner is.
Sure, Ross. Well, my wife's favorite kid's story growing up was Katie and the Big Snow. Katie was a snowplow who saved the day by clearing the streets for the police, the firefighters, and if she were in New York City, she would have done it for the taxi cabs. This data set can actually tell us a lot about how winter weather affects the cab business. This trend line shows some weekly patterns in total trips per day throughout the year. It shows us some seasonal patterns and some sharp drop-offs, which if you look at most of the labels, they show federal holidays account for most of these sharp dips. But there are a few data points that don't match that pattern. So if we compare the trend line with the bar chart at the bottom that shows snowfall measurements in Central Park, we see that these 3 days from January and February line up right in line with the first snow of the year and the two biggest snowfall events, of the season. We can also quantify that in terms of dollars. This chart shows a light gray bar that represents what you might collect on a normal day for a particular day of the week at a certain time of year. The darker bars show the total fare amounts from that day, and the bars to the right show the percentage difference between those two. So what this tells us is that snow days, which are highlighted in yellow, have just as much of an impact on fares, if not more so, than major holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving. But because you can't really plan for and predict exactly when those things are going to happen well in advance, the best thing that you can do is deal with it after the fact by plowing the streets. So this set of maps gives us some idea of which areas are most affected by snowstorms and this plowing operation. The first map here on the left serves as kind of our baseline because it shows drop-off patterns from 2 days before one of those major snowfalls. If we compare those patterns with the map in the middle, which is drop-off points from the day of the snowstorm where 11 inches fell in one day, we see that there's an overall dip in traffic, but there are a few areas that are more affected where we can see a lower density of dots, darker colors, for instance, down here in Brooklyn and around Queens, basically areas outside of Manhattan. But what we also see from this map on the right is that just one day after, those patterns are starting to get back to normal and look much more similar to that first baseline map that we saw. So what this tells me is that in the event of really significant winter weather, New York City is prepared for it, and they do what Katie the snowplow did. They work hard to clear the streets quickly and get everyone back to business. Thank you.
Oh yeah, you got it.
I love that you did storytelling and related it to an actual story. That's awesome. Clara, anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that was the coolest about getting to be witness to Robert's process in building this Viz is he truly uses the ad hoc analytics functionality that Tableau enables. He created the first view and saw those dips and had a second question and wanted to answer it. What are these dips that are not explained by the holidays? And what he did is he found these really great insights through this ad hoc analysis and then was able to show it, and he shared with me that he was very interested in sharing these kinds of wow insights with others. And I thought he did it really effectively using things like drop lines here. Another example is with the map. He was able to just display so many, such rich data on a single visualization. And here you can see side by side, the insight pops out. You have that decrease in density on the day of the snow day, and then the day after, it's right back to the way it was. And I think all of this just supports what a strong story it is. Hey, wow, there's a big impact of snow. Look how much it's impacting revenue. And then boom, you can see New York City is really well equipped to come right back up the next day, plowing the snow.
Thank you, Clara.
Great.
Well, that brings us to Curtis Harris. Curtis, we'd love to know what went into your visualization.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ross. And thank you, everyone, for coming to watch us. This is great. So when I first got this data set, I was looking at passengers, right? I think that's where maybe a few of us went. Where were they picked up? Where do they go? Who rides taxis? I started building my dashboard, and I began to realize that I was telling more of a story about the drivers of taxis, how daily taxi traffic impacts their lives, how the commutes may be a burden on the drivers' families, and the economic impact of incoming competition such as Uber and Lyft and other services. So how I wanted to break this down was more of a journalistic story laid out in kind of a 3-panel comic strip. You may have heard that analogy before, thanks to Tableau's Andy Cochran. So here we go. On the left is our entry. This is the start of our story, just some summary facts to get you diving into taxi data. 38 million taxi rides in the third quarter of 2014. 115 million miles driven, 64 million passenger service, and $588 million spent. And that is in 3 months. It's unbelievable.
Yes, probably.
Moving on, setting up a little extra context for the story, I wanted to really see the hours of the day, the traffic in New York, and how that might affect the cab drivers and the people. So if we look at this histogram here, we can really see that taxi traffic is pretty heavy. We're somewhere around 40,000 rides per day, 50,000 rides per day, with the peak hours being out here between the 6 p.m. hour and the 11 p.m. hour. And if you start to think about that from a cab driver's perspective, they are bringing us home to our families, to our friends, to our pets, and they are missing out on time with theirs. I don't think we ever really think about that, so this was enlightening to see how this could actually impact a cab driver's life. And if you look down here to the cycle plot, you can see that this is happening around the clock every single day for every cab driver in New York. In the 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. hours, they're busy on the weekends. You can see Sunday and Saturday peak. They have to service all of the nightlife New York party people. As we move along, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. hours, we see a different shape. We see an N shape showing the weekday commute. So we can see Monday through Friday, cab traffic is heavy when you would expect it, around the time people are going to work. And then again, circling back to 6 p.m. to midnight, we see that the cab drivers are just busy all the time. So think about that next time you're enjoying your little cab ride. They're working hard for us. And lastly, I wanted to really see how cab drivers are being impacted by different services that are coming in, such as Uber, Lyft, and others. So you can see I brought in some secondary data from 538 displaying traffic from Uber and the other stations. So we can see this little tracking reference line, which can show us the progress of those services' growth over time. And we really get a picture of the taxi service dwindling, where Uber and others are growing at an enormous rate. And what we're looking at here is a 7-day moving average to kind of smooth out the data and normalize it a bit, and then comparing it to the original point. The Uber and other data is so much smaller to the taxi traffic that we really had to find a way to compare their growth, and this actually helps us see that. And we can see that Uber and Lyft and all the others are taking over, even in 2014. So you can imagine what this would look like today. And then, as you saw, as I was building out, I had some extra time. So the next time you're on your cab, flipping through your phone, you can actually check out cab ride data. Right on your phone, it'll scale very nicely, pivoted down to be a long form Viz instead of a wide form. So that's my in-depth dive into the cab driver's life in New York.
Very nice. Zane, this is your chance to bring all of those persuasive skills that you've honed over your career. Sell us on this Viz.
Well, I mean, first, the computer over here is like hot. Like he was just on fire, man. I can like feel the heat. That was fun to watch. I think, I mean, any good story, it's got to be accessible. It's got to be something that you can relate to. And I just love the angle that Curtis took and kind of taking a different spin on this data. And not only is it accessible from that perspective, it's also like accessible from a technology perspective, you know, on your mobile device. And that he's done some really cool things even from a Tableau perspective. Like there's a LOD calculation in here. You know, he used the mobile platform that we just released in 10, and then he also went out like in the flow to a website and grabbed a third-party file and then integrated that into this. I think it's just a really classic kind of beautiful use case of what we want to empower anyone and everyone to do. So when I look at this, I mean, it's beautiful. It tells a great story, and man, it was a lot of fun up here to watch it.
And we know for sure that Curtis is down with LOD. Yeah, you know me.
Oh, yeah.
Again,
Well-
not sorry.
Well, we've seen our contestants' visualizations, and now it's time to move on to the judging. Judges, please do pass your cards to the right so we can tally up your votes. But as we do that, we'd love to hear from you and hear your opinions on the visualizations that we've seen from each one of our contestants as we go along. So we'll start with Curtis, so we'll just keep looking at his viz. And judges, what I'd like to do is start with Jock and then move down individually. And just, you know, tell us a little bit about what you see in the viz, what you like, things you might have done differently. We'd love to hear your expert opinions.
All of them are fabulous and very, very interesting. It was really interesting as we were sitting here talking. It was difficult to on the issue of visual best practices. All of them are very close to each other, so I had trouble splitting them apart. Chris and I were talking, and so I'm taking this out of his mouth. But Russell did a great job of sampling the data, because one of the problems you have with maps is you can have overplotting. And there's two ways to deal with that. One is by sampling the data down. He was using random. The other one is to use transparency. And so the key thing about Robert's maps, though, is that they're from very specific periods of time. So the overplotting is probably not quite so serious. And the middle one, of course, is focusing on that snow day. But I give Russell some credit for trying to deal with the massive amount of data. Second, well, I lost half of my notes, by the way. Right? Are we focusing on just Curtis right now?
Yeah. Just Curtis for now.
Okay, just Curtis. So for Curtis, I really, from a storytelling point of view, I like the focus on the taxi driver, and I think that the data that was marshaled for that story is really very, very good in terms of focusing on the data. I like the fact that the middle part, the alignment of both the histogram and the temporal data is very analytically deep and also is visually very easy to follow in terms of understanding it. So I like that a whole bunch. That's all I have to say. I know I have to be faster. So.
Chris?
Yeah, on Curtis's, I really love the strong narrative arc. From leading with the title right there into how he structured the left to right and really brought that story home. And even the subtle details like using the title as a legend, you see in several places, he really connected me with the story. I love that. I love how he did the moving average to take that extraneous detail out so I could just really focus on the trend that he was trying to tell the story about. And the indexing, so that comparison, the thing that I needed to care about was front and center. So I was really impressed with this one. I think the aesthetics, I think the strong narrative, how he played with time to really help me see, especially in that bottom plot there, you know, reordering the time dimension so I can see what the days feel like and how that changes over weekdays. Really love this one. It's great work.
Tom?
What Chris said. Overall, I mean, it came together. So you're just looking at it, and it tells a story. And so the comic strip line is it's very interesting to see the information just pop out at you and look at your eye, just look at different trends through each one of the different comic strip panels. So overall, I mean, I loved it. It was interesting because at first I wasn't sure what it was going to go with or the design, and it came out. And I love the context of comparing the overall growth, and it just shows how dramatic the growth has changed over time.
Shine?
And I think he also did the device designer.
Yes.
I think we caught a moment of that, which I was really impressed with as well.
Absolutely.
I gave him visual best practices for that. Doing a different layout for a different device. So.
It took the words out of my mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I think first of all, I know what it takes to be there on stage and build a great Viz. I think all three of them have done a great job, and I think that deserves a round of applause. So we've all talked about the strength of the story, and I think Curtis did a great job here. Love the cycle plots and how it tells the story. Also the blending of data, bringing in the Uber story in here. I also thought it was brave that he didn't use a map, even though there was location data in there. But I don't think he needed it to tell the story. One nit maybe that the metrics could have been a little bit larger in terms of font size, but overall I really loved the look and feel. So great job, Curtis.
Excellent work. Excellent work all around.
Next up, judges. Are you ready to look at Robert's Viz? Jock, tell us what you evaluated and what really stood out to you.
So I agreed with the comment you made, I believe, about the fact that he was very clever to have a story, introduce a story, and I thought that was really good. And the aesthetics here were fun, like the use of a special font to be able to get, you know, the taxi yellow cab kind of style to it is really good. Actually, I gave him some credit for the fact that he used story points, but not in the normal narrative story arc, but as a simple index into multiple views that are related to each other. When we built that feature, we intended it to be used both ways, and so this was one way we wanted to use it, but it's the first time we've seen that at Iron Viz, and so that was very, very good. Can you quickly flip back through the three parts of it? So remember this part. I was busy and so didn't completely understand what all the dips were for, but the snow day parts and the use of drop lines, I really liked that. That was very effective use of that feature that's underappreciated in terms of its useful value. So I like that a bunch. I think I'll leave more for my fellow judges to say, but that's the start. So
thank you.
Excellent. Well, that leads right into Chris. What did you think?
I loved how he used the branding right away to set the context for me, to know what I'm looking at, to get me into that story. I like the use of story points to break it up into digestible pieces, so I knew what to focus on. I knew what I was looking at. Blending in the holidays. As Jock already pointed out, the interactivity between the two items here, the highlighting, the drop lines, I thought that was really great. One thing I'd hoped for in that last view, the map, was some annotation or something to help me see the difference, because when the story was told to me I saw it, but I don't necessarily see it as clearly, and I think that might have helped a little bit here. But again, it's just a great story and a great visualization. Outstanding work.
Yeah, Robert, I would say the same thing. The minute that you put up the bright yellow checker cab, instantly, every time I looked at the screen, I kept looking at yours, so it caught my eye immediately, and I was like drawn into it. And so I think overall it was great. I love the way you had the exceptional days. I love story points because I was able to walk through all of this and kind of take the story as it goes. I agree with Chris. Maybe annotating this one would have been great, but overall, I thought you did a really good job catching my attention, which I think is an important part of Viz.
Absolutely. Shine?
Yeah, I think all of you have touched on this layout and aesthetics. It looks great. Can you switch to the fair gaps? Yeah, I thought there was a great use of a simple bar chart, but it just shows and highlights how the snow days are equivalent to Christmas Day or Thanksgiving Day in terms of the impact. Exceptional days, that chart. I love the drop lines as well. It was a great effect, and on the final map. I think Chris mentioned this, highlighting a little bit more how different that snowstorm day was compared to the day before and day after would have been great. Maybe add some metrics or add a pop of color to show the difference. But otherwise, I love the use of story points, and great job.
And one thing to add here is the added-in data was very compelling in this case.
Absolutely.
It was a good use of blending for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and that brings us to our final contestant before we announce the winner. Judges, starting with Shine, actually, so Shine can have the opportunity to talk first. Russell's visualization, what did you think?
I really liked the way it's laid out. It's one cohesive dashboard. And I like the fact that I could select specific dates. So for example, I could look at Christmas Day, for example, which might be interesting. Also, I love the highlighting, so the interactivity between the bar charts and the maps. Also, interesting context on the distance to the moon, for example, that got an applause. Is because you're connecting with your audience and helping them understand how to interpret the data. I thought that was great. In terms of things that could be improved, I think that the KPIs, the ones at the bottom versus the ones on the left, it seemed a little bit disconnected. And the chart of the minutes, perhaps, I wasn't able to get the insight from that chart. But overall, I think it all hangs well, really, together. So great job, Russell.
Thank you, Shine. Tom?
Yep. Yeah, so Russell, out of the gate, I was just captivated with how you were designing it, because everybody else was doing it in pieces, and it just seemed like you had your master plan out of the gate, and I kept liking what you were adding to it and how it was going. And then when you added the filtering, it all was coming together. So overall, I thought it was wonderful. I think of it as an application. It would be on a phone, quite frankly, that you could utilize and go with. So I thought you did a great job. I really like it. I like how tight it is. I like the white space. I think it's very visually pleasing because I can see what's going on in a very, very quick amount of time. So overall, I thought it was great.
Chris?
Yeah, I really like this one as well. I like the thoughtfulness of sampling the data on the map. I thought that was great. I also like how he thought about the level of detail and let me really see this data at different levels of detail. He thought about all the aspects of the distribution. So I can get a pretty deep understanding of the data in this dashboard. The use of the hover action so that the interactivity really invites me in there and I don't have to click, I'm drawn in. I thought those were all really great aspects of this. Obviously putting it in context, that was great. I did desire a little more sort of orientation or story bringing me into this. I definitely felt like I could play around, but I'm not sure I knew what I was supposed to find, and so a little more story I think would have helped.
I have a couple of comments along those lines. Those parameters are really cool, but the parameter widgets are like almost invisible on the view. Like, I particularly liked it when you did the moon part, but how would have I ever found being able to do that? I thought it was a really great idea. And then the second part is that your food view used images really well. I could imagine that we could have had images of the moon pop up here and stuff like that. That would have really helped.
20 minutes. 20 minutes.
I understand. I'm really impressed, actually, what all of you have done in 20 minutes. It's really tremendous.
Absolutely. And then that brings us to a round of applause for all of you. Excellent work.
It's done now.
Contestants,
right,
the hour
excuse
has
me,
arrived.
I gotta go off.
It's time to announce the winner of the 6th annual Tableau Iron Viz Championship. Kathleen?
All right, I've got the marks card. The winner of 2016 Iron Viz is Curtis Harris.
Thank you guys. You guys too. It was awesome. That was so fun.
Great job.
Thank you.
Curtis, we'd love to hear from you. How do you feel now?
This is great. I mean, you guys are all my friends. Thank you for coming. I want to know every single one of you, so come hang out with me tonight and let's all have a drink. I'm tired of looking at data visualization.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, Curtis, I think I can say for everybody in the room that we stand in awe of you, and I can speak for Kathleen and I on stage when we say that we stand in awe of all of our customers who create these visualizations every day at work. And next year, you could be on stage as well. So remember to follow our Tableau public visualization contests and enter throughout the year to be able to join a couple other contestants on stage next year. Please also remember to rate the Iron Viz session, and we'll see you all at Data Night Out.
Thank you very much. Yeah.